Well, I'm really glad to be joined by Lightning assistant coach Todd Richards, who was behind the bench for the Lightning in that 2018 second round series between the Lightning and Boston Bruins. We're going to get to that series, which the Lightning won in 5 games, in just a second. But first, Todd, I wanted to check in, see how you and your family were doing, and if you're staying sane.
We're staying sane. It's a difficult thing to do, but thankfully my family, my wife's family, everybody's good. Both my kids are in their 20s. They're young adults, so they're on their own. I believe that they're doing the right things. You like to think that as a parent, but they're safe right now. Health is good. So
your son Justin had an opportunity in Minnesota Duluth to potentially win a third consecutive NCAA title. What was his level of disappointment that he and his teammates didn't even have an opportunity to go for a third title?
Justin was extremely disappointed. I think like a lot of his teammates were. I think anything in that situation is no different than us a little bit too. I think there are some parts during the season that you get excited about. Obviously the start of the season and the end of the season, getting ready for the playoffs. And the light was clearly at the end of the tunnel. It was right there. And those are times you get excited and look forward to. So this pause or this delay has affected that. It's nice that we're going to get back and go to work and finish this thing. So we are excited about that. But in his case, his season got ended so abruptly and so suddenly. And to not have that chance to go for a three-peat, I think was extremely disappointing for him, disappointing for his mother, his father, people associated with him and his team, because I think those players have given up a lot. There's been a lot of sacrifice that goes in. I think some of the players had a chance to sign prior to the start of the third year and go pro, but I think they wanted to come back and do it as a group. So disappointed, but as one door closes, another one opens up. He signed with the New York Rangers during this whole quarantine process, so we're extremely proud of him and excited to follow him as his pro career starts.
Well, congratulations to him for sure. So going back to that 2018 series, I think before we look at the series, it is important to kind of reference what had happened in the regular season between the Lightning and Bruins. And I know that you and the other coaches often say that what happens in a regular season series is often irrelevant when you get into a playoff series. But in the case of the Lightning and Bruins, you had 4 games in the regular season series. The final 3 of them all took place within the last couple of weeks of the regular season. They had beaten you early in the year, and then they won the next 2 rather convincingly. So you head into the final meeting. It's the last week of the regular season. It's game 80 for the Lightning. You're at home, and you really put forth a complete performance. You shut them out 4-0, played very well. Do you think that getting that game under your belt against them, and you're going to be seeing them in a playoff series about 3 weeks later, was that important, maybe more than an ordinary regular season game, not only because you won it, but how you won it?
That's a good point. I think the psyche of it was probably way more important than the outcome. Even if you won the game but clearly outplayed them, I think that means a lot as far as confidence in going in.
So you get into the second round series against the Bruins, and they come into Tampa and they win game 1 rather convincingly, 6-2, and their top line, which is still intact 2 years later, and it's one of the best lines in the NHL with Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak, had a big game. They combined for 11 points. You would have to have a response to them, certainly specifically, but your shutdown line, if you want to call it that, the line you like to match against the opposition's top unit entering the playoffs, was a line of Braden Point, Tyler Johnson, and Andre Palat. And you had matched them against Taylor Hall's line in the first round series against New Jersey. And they had really been quite effective in limiting Hall, specifically, and his line mates. And you had them out against the Bergeron line in game 1, and they had a tough game. I believe Point was -5. Johnson and Palat were -4 and -3. So as a coaching staff, I guess you have a decision to make after game 1. You can either stand pat and keep the same matchup. You could try a different line, or maybe you just throw the whole thing in a blender and mix up all of your lines and find a different combination to use against Bergeron and his line mates. And you guys decided to stand pat. Maybe you can talk us through, like, what went into that decision to come back with Point, Palat, and Johnson, because they had a great game too and they had a great rest of the series. So it was clearly the right decision. But like, what went into that decision process between games 1 and 2?
Well, I wish I could give you, some real specifics about it. In looking back, I think that a lot of that was Coop's call. I think he had conversations with those guys, and you talked about the previous series about them having success. The other thing about athletes, and especially when you get to this level, in particularly I think there's some different categories once you get to the NHL, but the guys that are above average, kind of superior guys, the guys that are true NHL players, I think it's that competitive edge. And those guys had proven that. Andre Palat, we know. Braden Point, we know. Tyler Johnson, we know. They're competitors. There's a lot of pride in their game. And I think when it came down to it, at the time to make that decision, it was almost more of a challenge to them that's what they want. They wanted that opportunity to do that again, to go after them again. And I believe Coop had a conversation with those guys and did talk about that and did bring up those numbers with them and basically said, listen, my confidence is in those guys went out and did it.
There are always points within a series or even within a game when you know your team is going to have to deliver. And I think game 2 is certainly one of those games, because you lose that, you're down 0-2 going to Boston, which had been certainly a very tough place for the Lightning to play. And it may not be reflected in how close the final score was. It was 4-2 with an empty netter. But you guys went long stretches where the Bruins didn't even get a shot on net. I believe you outshot them 10-0 at the start of that game. And Torrey Krug scores kind of off a weird face-off play to make it 3-2 with 4 minutes left. They're within 1. You don't allow another shot the rest of the game in the last 4 minutes. What kind of a statement do you think your team made in that game, bouncing back from a really leaky game 1 to shut things down as well as they did in game 2, based on kind of the numbers I was just throwing at you? You held them to 13 5-on-5 shots for the entire game.
Well, it was a big statement by our team in game 2. And you are right. There are some motivations. Maybe they do get a little bit comfortable, a little bit more comfortable than game 1 because it was an easier game. Maybe they expected that to be the same. I don't think so, but you never know. That it does take a little bit of edge away. And obviously in our game, because you are right. In the back of your mind, being down 0-2 and having to go to Boston, because we know what it's like to play in Boston. You didn't have a lot of success there during the regular season. So it's going to be hard, and they're going to be a better team in front of their own fans. Our guys did a great job. You have to control teams 5-on-5 and to be able to shut them down the way that we did. And as you said, big moments in games. As you talked about Torrey Krug's goal, it was a big moment for them to draw them close. How do you react after that goal? And when the pressure truly came to that point of, are you going to step up to the pressure or are you going to fold to the pressure? They stepped up to the pressure and really responded well. And again, you talk about confidence and really how confidence can grow in series. And you can certainly lose confidence, how momentum goes in series. And they had momentum coming out of game 1, but we clearly took the momentum after game 2.
So you go to Boston, it's 1-1. They are ramped up to play at home. Their fans are ramped up. It's the first game in Boston in the series. And before the first period is even 4 minutes old, you guys have a 2-0 lead. Palat scores twice. Look, it's always great to get an early lead, but given that specific situation where it's their first home game in the series and they knew that they got one on the road, how big was it to make that statement early and take the crowd out of the game?
We talk about sometimes dipping your toe in the water. you know what it's like in the middle of summer. Maybe not. Maybe it's beginning of spring, and you're unsure about how cold the water is, and you go up and you just kind of dip your toe in to test it. It's no different sometimes in hockey games. You know, you go into it and you kind of dip your toe, but at that point, the other team has kind of steamrolled you, and now you're looking uphill. But we jumped right into that game, and I think we caught them off guard. I don't think that there are some extra pressures at playing at home. You know, some things, a little bit more distractions, those types of things. And clearly, when you go on the road and you're in your hotel room and you go from your hotel room to the bus to the rink and from the bus back to your hotel, it's all hockey. It's all hockey. And sometimes there is an advantage to that. So we were able to get a quick 2-0 lead and kind of take the energy out of the building early. And that clearly was an advantage.
Those two early goals from Palau were a big key, but the first period had some other twists and turns to it. The Lightning had back-to-back power play chances to make it 3 or even 4-0, but you can't score. Then the Bruins get a power play, and they do score. So now it's 2-1. There's like 5 minutes left in the first period. The crowd is starting to get back into it. And within a shift or two, Cirelli scores. It's his first playoff NHL goal. And it really sucked the life right out of what the Bruins had going. You talk about big moments in the game. Like, how significant was that goal coming on the heels of their 2 good penalty kills and then them scoring the power play?
When I first got into coaching, I worked with a coach named Claude Noel. And I think as players, maybe you hear it. I don't know if you give it as much time. Maybe there's not a lot of value in it. I don't know, but I do believe this. That there are big moments in games. There are big shifts in games, and starting games or starting periods. And the last shift of a period, the last shift of game is huge. But also, after big moments in games that happen, like they score, a team scores. What is the next shift? Are you able to, if you score the goal, are you able to maintain that mentality of attacking? Or does the other team go out and take that momentum? Because clearly there is a little bit of momentum. There is a little bit of confidence after goal. And when the other team score, what is going to be your response? And it's a little bit goes back to game 2 and what we talked about when Torrey Krug scored. How are we going to respond in that moment? And by scoring that goal, obviously that was a huge moment. It really doused a lot of the energy or positive energy that they had created, even though it was a little bit. But that is energy that you can build off of and keep building off of to try to create more energy, which hopefully will give you more of an advantage.
You know, it seems funny that we talk about Cirelli's first NHL goal in the playoffs because it kind of feels like he's been with the Lightning forever. But he'd only been with you guys a couple of months at that point. Did you have a sense when he came up for good in March that year that he was going to be someone special?
You know, yeah, I think you knew he was going to be an NHL player. You know, fast forward, what is it, 2 years now to where he's at now. I don't know if you ever predicted that he would be that type of player that he is now for us. You know, there's a lot of, you know, you could probably compare him a little bit to other centermen around the league that have that good two-way game, and that's what he has. Defensive-minded, just because of the roles that he has been given and that he accepts, but he shows you the flashes of offensive ability and offensive talent. And he's earned every bit of ice time that he gets. He's earned every opportunity that he's been given because of how he plays the game. And to all those people out there, those young kids or parents trying to teach their kids, I use him as an example with my youngest son. He started out as this. This is what he was. But now you look at him, he's being thrust into, he gets power play minutes, he gets 4-on-4 minutes, he gets all these big minutes because he's a trustworthy guy, accepted his role, and then just let his play do the talking for him and has demanded more and more ice time and more opportunities.
Cirelli's goal makes it 3-1. There's still 40 minutes left in the game, but you didn't give them anything. And they had 15 shots the entire rest of the game. they didn't have any more power play chances. So you guys did a good job of staying out of the box. How gratifying is it to kind of see the game plan executed as well as the Lightning did to keep them quiet after you had quieted them down in the late part of the first period?
Well, again, it's confidence. It's momentum. I once, this is going back a ways, when I first got into coaching, we used we always talk about momentum. What is momentum? They have momentum, we have momentum, because clearly at that time we had momentum throughout the game, probably from game 2, the way game 3 started, and all the way through game 3. We had momentum, and we never really gave it up. There might have been spurts here or there where they got it just for a little bit, took it back from them. And I think that becomes demoralizing. I think it becomes one of those walls where they're, each shift these guys are going over the boards. And I'm talking about the Boston Bruins, because I've been on the other side of that too, where you can't get anything done versus the other team. It just seems like whatever you try, it is. Again, I think that helped us at that time during that series, that we had the momentum. You could feel it on our bench. There was a confidence. I think the other thing that's important to talk about in this series, I'm not sure really when it started. I know it started from our fourth line with, I think it was Seti Paquette, Ryan Callahan, and Chris Kunitz, was our physical play. Now, it wasn't just those guys, because we had other guys step up too. But I think the physical aspect of that series, the way it started to turn a little bit, where we were probably always thought of the smaller, more skilled team. We were going to play a faster, more skilled game, and versus teams that played a more physical game we struggled against. Well, we completely flipped that page. And I think we were the more physical. We were the more physically dominant. And again, I think that was an aspect throughout the series after game 1 that started to kind of change the series. And again, gave us confidence, knowing that we could probably, in a lot of ways, play a good skilled game. But now a physical element came that we were like, okay, we're taking it to them here. We can keep doing this.
So you head into game 4. Now you have a lead in the series. And again, you jump out to a 2-0 lead. But this time the Bruins were able to build on a late first period power play goal. They made it 2-1. And this time they tied it early in the second and then scored shorthanded in the third to make it 3-2. Stamkos ties it. You guys had a strong push in the second half of the third period. So it goes to overtime. And that's the Girardi goal. And I know Lightning fans remember Girardi standing in front of the net when he deflects that in. What I had forgotten, I went back and watched the goal, was that like 5 seconds before Girardi scores, Ryan McDonagh makes a pinch to hold in an attempted clear by Ryan Donato. Donato gets the puck along the boards. McDonagh pinches. Killorn covers for him. Puck comes back to Killorn. He brings it down low and throws it in front. Here you are in overtime in the playoffs, and both your defensemen are pinching, which I know that's your game plan, and both were smart pinches. Like, there were guys covering in both instances. But is there an element as a coach where you don't want to coach restraint? You know what I'm saying? Like, you want the defenseman to be aggressive, even though it's a playoff overtime game, as McDonagh and Girardi both were.
Well, I think on that goal, one thing you want to teach the defenseman, really the mentality of your whole team, is play on our toes. You don't want to change the mentality of how you play the game for particular situations. Now, having said that, if you're up by 2 goals late in the third period, you might dial it back a little bit, but you still want to play for the next goal. By playing for the next goal, it just means executing your systems, going out and doing the right things, paying attention to the little details, because by doing all those things in succession, a lot of times leads to success. So when you go back and watch that it's not probably how you practice it, how you draw it up, but there were lots of little things that happened during that play that led us to that particular outcome.
I think a lot of people were surprised it was 3-1. You guys had a chance to close them out in game 5, which you did. And this is the broadcast that's going to be airing tonight. What I remembered about game 5 was how Point and JT Miller scored in the second period. And it was a really good second period for the Lightning. And you went up 2-1. You ended up winning the game 3-1. When I went back and looked at the game, though, what I had not remembered was it had been a frustrating first period for you guys. You had 2 early power play chances, couldn't score. Then you have a long 5-on-3 against. You get through the 5-on-3. Girardi comes out of the box, but you already have 2 defensemen out there, Hedman and Colbert. So now you got 3 defensemen and 1 forward. And like a few seconds later, Krejci scores in the last minute of the first period. And all those different elements are very frustrating, I'm sure, for players and coaches. And you could see a script where, well, you didn't capitalize in the first period on your power play chances. You couldn't get through the 5-on-3, goal in the final minute. Game 5 might have unfolded differently. But I think it says a lot that you guys were able to kind of shrug that off. Was that kind of a trademark of this team, that you had some elements in the game that weren't going your way, but you found a way to push back hard in the second period? You held them to 5 shots. And as I just mentioned, that was the period that basically won you the game.
Again, moments in games, and how are teams going to respond? And credit to our players, credit to the leaders in the room. That's one thing I didn't talk about was, internally, a lot of this stuff we talk about unwavering under pressure and staying with it and gaining momentum and not giving up momentum. As coaches, you take. I think we can talk on the bench and we can do things, but a lot of it has to come from the players internally. And I'm not in the locker room. I'm not there a lot of the time. We're in the coach's office, trying to come up with solutions or whatever. But the players are the ones sitting in the locker room, and you got to give credit to them and the guys in the room who became the leaders. And it doesn't just mean the guys wearing the letters on their jerseys. Anybody can lead, whether their voice or their actions. And clearly we had that in that series, because you're right. There are moments where you could stumble, you could lose it, you could lose that mental edge, giving up a goal, and even being up 3-1, going, okay, well, maybe it's not this game, maybe it's the next game. And you can't have that attitude. So to regroup, to recover, and then come out and play the second period we did was a credit to the players.
In the final 3 games of that series, games 3, 4, and 5, the Lightning did not allow a 5-on-5 goal. Based on what we just said at the start of this conversation about the Bergeron line, and they did get their points on the power play, but to shut them out and shut that team out 5-on-5 in games 3, 4, and 5 is quite an accomplishment. How do you think the Lightning were able to do it?
Oh, I think it was building momentum throughout the series. It was the little things I think that we started to accomplish and started to see that we had success with. How we managed the puck, being physical, obviously knowing who you're out on the ice against, being responsible against, you just talked about it, the Bergeron line. In listening to you talk, obviously our penalty kill needed to be a lot better, because clearly it sounds like we gave up lots of goals on their power play. But that was the Bruins. They had a tremendous power play, and you had to limit those opportunities. But just the moments, and I do remember that series. I do remember thinking that there was some edge to our team, some physicality edge that we got in that series that I hadn't seen all year. And I think that was a big catalyst to help us throughout the series and to help us win that in 5 games.
The rivalry has continued between the Lightning and Bruins. You guys were 1-2 in the regular season last year. As we pause the season this year, you're 1-2 in the division and 1-2 in the conference. How much can a playoff series ramp up the intensity of a rivalry as you guys now have with the Bruins?
I don't know who said it. There was some coach that said it, that said rivalries are created in the playoffs. And he's 100% right. And I think it's, you look at, I would put Boston in there as one of the elite teams in the league. Consistently year after year, you expect them to be up at the top because of the players that they have, the coaching that they get. They're going to be there. So they're, to me, one of the elite teams. I consider us one of the elite teams in the league as well. with the talent and the coaching and obviously having the success that we've had. So whenever you take two really successful teams and you play them against each other, and especially in the playoffs, it's going to create that animosity between the two. And then now regular season games take on a little bit more as well because of that rivalry. But the rivalry was really created from playoffs or playoff series and being elite teams and fighting to be that alpha male dog in the NHL, or at least the alpha male in the Eastern Conference.
Well, Todd, it's been great reminiscing about happy times in the playoffs. Hopefully we'll have more happy times in the playoffs coming up down the road here later in the summer. But thanks for taking a little bit of time to chat about that great playoff series between the Lightning and Bruins.
All right, great. My pleasure sitting and talking to you. And you know what, Mish? This is what we'll do. 2022, you and I will sit down in the summer when we're off season, and we'll go over a playoff series that was played in 2020.
Perfect. Now we've got the 2-year gap. Yeah, exactly.
We'll talk about that.
Thanks again, Todd.
All right, Mish.